they'd go back and they'd drink and they'd have fun, and I read stories about showgirls and things like that. Is any of this true?
I would imagine that on occasion it was all true, but not as a regular routine thing that became like a ritualistic thing night by night. It depended on the mood everyone was in. I really don't know how to explain it because I was not there all that much. When that was going on, I was in college. And it was a lot of fun to see what they called the summit then when they were all together. They had a wonderful time when this was happening. Nobody ever dreamed in that group that one day it would become legendary. You know what I mean? But it was just fun, just a bunch of guys who got together, and they had a wonderful time. Your observation about the late Sammy Davis is correct. There was a time when not only Sammy, but all the black performers could play on the Las Vegas Strip, for example, but they could not live there. Sammy Davis, Dorothy Dandridge, Nat King Cole, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, all of them. I, for example, began working at one of the hotels in 1963, the first time. In order to go onto this little lounge stage, and I was singing with a dance band in those days, you used to have to walk into the rear of the bar area and go up a small stairway to the back of the stage. Next to the stairway that ascended to the stage, there was another stairway which descended to the basement under the bar, was a wire caged-in area where they used to store boxes of liquor and the like. When we alternated with the Count Basie band, and this was 1963, in between the sets that the band played, they had to go down that flight of stairs into the wire caged-in area and stay there where tables and chairs had been put for them. There could not even be, for their pleasure, a television to watch because it would have had to have been cabled, and in those days cable television had not really started yet. This was what it was like at that time. The integrational picture, which was in its right at the pinnacle of its, shall we say, troublesome point, was right there, 1963, 1964, 1965. And the United States of America, like all countries, has to go through growing pains, and that was one of them, you know. Only later, and it was Sinatra who was the kingpin of that, when he finally got to some of these people that ran these hotels and said, when are you people going to come into the 20th century? Now, we have white people, and we have yellow people, and we have black people, but the money they spend is the same nice color green. And it's time we started looking at it, unless you want to invest in antiquities. And all of a sudden, the message was received, was acknowledged, and things began to change. I can remember going to a place one time in Las Vegas at that particular point in time, and as I say, in all due respect, this was well over 40 years ago. A jazz workshop used to meet in one of the lounges in one of the hotels on a Monday night, usually. And I would go over with some of the other guys, musicians from other shows, different singers, musicians from other hotels. We would go to listen to the jazz and hear the visiting artists who had come into town to play. One night, I was told by someone that somebody had brought up the point, it's funny how we never see any black performers in the jazz club. And suddenly it became, clear to all of us that that was not just coincidental, that was deliberate. And I said, I never really thought of that. I never noticed that before. And one of the men said very quietly, Frank, in case you're not aware of it, some months ago, Louis Armstrong was here in town. They wouldn't even let him play in the show. This doesn't say much for our society at that time. Hopefully we are getting a little bit better,